Hi everyone, my name is Mark Rambacher. I'm the chair of the Library Trustees, and we're going to present some information on the new library project. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on LCTV streaming later. So we have the opportunity to build a new library, to modernize our facility and build one that's worth the vibrant community we're in. The library will be about half of the cost. Will cost about half of the cost is covered by funds other than taxpayer funds. So why do we need a new library? Well, we're running out of space in our current facility. We need more room for children's programming. We would like to have a young adults area that's not right next to Sam's office, so that they can have a little bit of privacy. We don't have any quiet study rooms in the library. We have one quiet study room in the library that, depending on the day, will be too hot or too cold, and it's not really very comfortable or useful for studying. We need more computers in the library for people to use, and we need space for more materials. Right now, we're weeding books fairly aggressively. Any book that hasn't circulated in 3 years or less, in the past 3 years, is weeded out of the library, which is more aggressive than most libraries. And we have to do that because the state mandates how much we spend on materials every year. So we keep buying new books, and there's just not room on the shelves. So we need more room on the shelves. In meeting rooms, one of the reasons we're over here today is because the meeting room in the library is booked, but we also would like to have a meeting room in the library that's capable of doing video recordings and things like that. The new library plan calls for a 120-seat meeting room that will be subdividable into 2 sections, so plus another large 30-ish, another large meeting room downstairs, and a bunch of quiet study rooms. So, and most of the rooms will be available for after-hours use. So we'd like to have a more modern library that has better accessibility. If you try to come in the front door, you have stairs and things to go up, so you can't really come in with a wheelchair. The shelves are too close together for a lot of wheelchair access and to get around. Well, the current library is on 3 floors, so it's really hard to staff. People that use the library now will notice that there's almost never staff on the bottom floor. So if patrons need help, they have to go up. It's also a security issue with no one on the bottom floor. The new library will be 2 floors, easier to staff across the board. The building will be more energy efficient than the current library. People that go over there will notice that in the middle of the winter, some of the windows will be open because the heat's too high. The summer, there's problems with it getting too cold. There's all kinds of general heating issues. And we'd like to better use our space that we have. The current facility was designed as a school. So we're trying to retrofit a school into a library, and a custom-built library will be better able to use the space we have. So how did we get here? Well, we started fundraising for a new library in 2009. In 2011, the town put together it was called the Chair of Chairs, and basically all of the boards got together and decided, prioritizing things in town, like the fire station and Council on Aging building, things like that. And the chairs actually envisioned a new library coming in about 2015, which is when we thought the next construction grant round would be at that time. So in 2014, we were awarded a planning grant from the state for $40,000. And this grant went to the initial design of the new library. We applied for, and we ended up picking the slope site out back. So the library, new design for the library, the building will be basically straight behind the tennis courts. It doesn't interfere with the tennis courts. It doesn't interfere with the sledding hill. We picked that site after a meeting with a bunch of other boards in town, the representatives across the board. We looked at many different alternatives, expanding the existing facility, 3 other sites in town, I believe, and that was one that was deemed best by that board. In 2017, town meeting approved us applying for a grant, And in 2019, at the May town meeting, the town gave us $1.5 million to finish the design of the library, which we've taken it from the sketches that we had before into a much more detailed, not quite construction-ready documents, but we're getting there. In July, MBLC awarded us our grant, so we have a $5.8 million construction grant. So, as I said, where are we? Well, we have the $5.8 million grant from MBLC. This grant, we have 6 months from the date that we got the grant for the town to approve their share of the funding. If the town doesn't approve the money, we lose the grant. There's additional funds provided by MBLC if we build in a LEED certified building. So if it's energy efficient, we'll get the number, I don't know the exact numbers, between 100 and 150,000. Partially depends on how what LEED certification level we go to. The grant is paid to Littleton over 5 years by MBLC, so we get 20% a year. The money is guaranteed that we're going to get the 20% a year if we meet certain milestones. I believe where we're at now, we've already probably met milestone from year number 2. Like year number 5 is you have the library constructed, I think, so we're well on our way. The projected cost of the library is $14.5 million at this point. When we applied for the grant, it was less than that. The increase was basically because of increased construction costs, and we didn't design for the additional fire road at back originally, so that was added into the plans now. So the fire road is, there's a path that comes up between the path that goes between Shattuck Street and Russell Street. There's a path that the highway department currently uses to get access to mow the ball fields. That pathway has to be improved so that it will support the weight of a fire truck for safety purposes. So that is now part of our plans and part of our budget. So as I said, the town awarded $1.5 million towards this project in May, and the trustees and PMBC are working really hard to control the cost so that the number stays as close to 14.5 as we can. We'll have a new estimate coming out before town meeting, so at town meeting, the number might not be 14.5. It'll be around there, hopefully. We'll have that number on the 21st, the week of the 21st. We'll have that number published. So as I said, we've been doing a lot of fundraising. Between money that we have in the bank and pledges, we have almost $700,000 committed to this project. The pledges are typically paid out over 4 years, so we don't have, and they're contingent on this passing at town meeting. So I believe we have about $500,000 in cash and $200,000 in pledges, roughly. The goal is to reach $1 million. And when we started this project, I thought $1 million seemed like a lot of money to raise. Now I feel very confident that we'll be able to reach that. We have a lot of donations and pledges to name areas in the library, and we're working actively to name the rest of the library. So how will the town pay for their share? So at town meeting, the town has to vote to approve the entire budget. So the $14.5 million. There'll be an article, it's Article 13 on the warrant, to raise and appropriate or borrow, I don't know the exact wording on it, but it'll be for the whole $14.5 million. The MBLC will be paying back their share of that, over the 20% over 5 years, and the money that the trustees fundraise will also be going to offset that 14.5. And the $1.5 million that we had in the spring will also offset that. So we're at the total number is 14.5, but what you're actually being asked for is much lower than that in October. So the selectmen voted to put this on as it's going to be funded inside the levy initially. So in October, there's a warrant article that says to vote to support the library. It requires a 2/3 vote. It'll be inside the levy. It does not raise your taxes. The way they worded, the selectmen chose to word it is that they can, there's a clause in there that says they may hold a override vote at a future date. which will most likely be in the spring. If the library passes in October by 2/3, we have a library going forward. In May, they will be potentially asking for an override. If the override passes, the library will be funded outside the levy, meaning your taxes will go up by the amount of the override. If the override fails, we'll still have a library, your taxes won't go up. So here's a breakdown of the cost for the library at $14.5 million. The areas in blue are basically grant money from MBLC and the LEAD grant. And the orange is the fundraising number. So those numbers together comprise about 48% of the cost of the library. We also have the design funds at $1.5 million that were already allocated and being spent, which is another $1.5 million or 10%. So the additional money allocating by the town is about $6.1 million. So what happens from here? So at October town meeting, we're Article 13, we need a 2/3 vote for the library to proceed. We're still working on the design and an update. If the vote passes, construction for the new library will most likely begin sometime in the spring. And MBLC will be starting to distribute our grant, I believe in December, but I'm not exactly positive. It'll be happening soon. And then in 16-ish months, 20 months, we'll have a new library built. If the project does not pass by 2/3 at town meeting, we will not have the MBLC grant. We won't be able to apply for the grant until the next round, which is anticipated to be about 10 years out, at which point the library will cost a lot more based on increased construction costs. We'll still be paying back the $1.5 million that the town already allocated. We still have all the same issues we have with the library with space and ADA compliance that we'll have to figure out how to address without the benefit of the grant. And we won't have the beautiful new library out back. So we're asking people to come out and vote yes in October for our new library. The meeting's October 28th, 7 p.m. in the Russell Street, or the middle school gym, Charles K. Gym. So I'm going to turn it over to Phil, who's going to present some pictures on the new library, and we'll both take any questions you may have.
Thanks, Mark. All right. My name is Phil O'Brien at Johnson Roberts Associates, Architects. We are, at this point, as Mark mentioned, further along down in the design than we were a couple of years ago when we helped the town do a study and apply for the grant. At that period, we were in the schematic design phase, and it's kind of the way it sounds. We're looking at kind of broad brush ideas, big scale items, and then since we've started again working with the building committee after the vote that Mark mentioned for the additional amount that you had for $1.5 million, we've been working with the library building committee to finish the schematic design, and it's actually the design of the building has revised a little bit since the time that we presented it to the Board of Library Commissioners. We took the feedback that we got from the grant readers there and the feedback that we got from the building committee and that the library had been hearing from the town, and come up with a different design. There's some boards in the back there if anybody wants to take a closer look. Those are not quite as up to date as the images I'm going to show you, but they're pretty close. And so if anybody has any questions, I could afterwards I can kind of scroll back, or we could kind of chat about the drawings in the rear there. We are getting close to the end of the second design phase, which is called the design development phase. There's a lot more kind of nitty-gritty that goes into the design phase. We're figuring out how the building is going to be framed, what kind of mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems and so forth we're going to have in the building. If you had asked me in 2016 if I knew what kind of roof was going to be on the building, I might have been able to guess, but now we've kind of figured that out. And we've put a package together that we have sent off to our cost estimators, and they're working on that now, and that's what Mark alluded to. So there's a lot more information for the cost estimators to work on to get us a much better, more accurate price. We built some contingency into our pricing back when we did the grant, to allow for the fact that some time has gone by. A little bit more time has gone by than the Board of Library Commissioners allows in their grant process, is a maximum of 3 years. And we need to escalate it out to the midpoint of construction. We're talking about a spring start next year, and so that escalation takes you out pretty much almost to 2020. So based on that, I can kind of give you a glimpse of where we are. Here's the floor plans. The floor plans look a lot like they did on those boards there. They're a little messier looking because there's a lot more going on to them at this phase of the project. The plans still have a lot of the same things going on. It's going to be hard for me to point at that screen. Can folks see this one if I point at this one? I'm not going to point at any tiny little rooms, but generally it's a 2-story building with the upper floor that pretty much lines up with the parking lot out the back. So you'll be able to walk directly into the upper floor from the parking lot, and there are no ramps or different floor levels anywhere on the upper level. And when you walk into that upper level, as you walk straight across and out to the back part of the building here, the ground is still going to slope away underneath the building, and so as you get close to the back here, you'll be up above the ground at the rear, looking out at the woods and the trees behind. And so to kind of take advantage of that, one of the things that I think you'll notice in this plan is along the front, and if you look at the model pictures, and I've got some more I'm going to show you as well. The windows along the front here are a little bit smaller. The windows along the back side looking out towards the woods are a little larger. We have also taken advantage of that natural light that comes in from that part of the building to put the places where people are going to kind of gather in those areas. And so these are where the people, the chairs, the tables, the browsing collections are. The periodicals collections all happen in these spaces. And then kind of tucked back where it's a little darker and the windows are a little smaller, we have book stacks kind of in these areas. Right in the center of the plan when you come in is the circulation desk, so they can keep an eye on what's going on. People coming in and out of the front door, they can also see down into the spaces and keep an eye on what's going on inside the building and what's happening with the public. That's backed up directly by the circulation desk in their offices. There's a small door in here for deliveries and so forth. And right here at the front lobby, we've got things like janitor's closet, a friend's book sale storage and book sale room, toilet rooms, an elevator, and a set of stairs that go down to the lower floor. The idea here also is that there's going to be a large meeting room in the building, as Mark mentioned, that will hold 120 people. That's in chairs. If you wanted to do tables and chairs, that takes up a little bit more room, so you wouldn't get quite as many people in there. But standing room only, you can probably put a couple hundred people in there, as long as it's okay with the fire department. Those spaces, along with some other meeting spaces, are downstairs. And so the way that the front lobby is designed is that we can close it off at this point. The rest of the library upstairs is secured. You can still have access to the stairs, the elevator, and the toilets, and get downstairs to use those facilities in the evening when the rest of the library is closed and secure. So if we go downstairs, if you take either the elevator or the stairs down, you get down into the central lobby downstairs. There's that large meeting room over on the side. We've got two smaller conference rooms in the rear that have a wall between them that can be opened up. So that room can be turned into one larger room that's almost as big as half of this larger room. This larger room is also dividable so that you can do 2 meetings in there. There's a local history room here at the rear. We don't have any natural light that comes into that room, but that's great for the local history materials. They don't need any natural light that accelerates their degradation. But that space is also secured, and the materials will be secured, so you can use that for a meeting space after hours as well. We've got mechanical spaces and storage spaces kind of tucked back up against the hill. This lower level, you remember if you're coming into the upper level, this lower level is tucked into the hill then, so there's no windows on this side. That's buried up against the hill. But as you get around to the sides of the building, there's windows all the way around. This will not feel like a basement. It will feel like an upper floor, if anything. And when you get to the back portions of these rooms, they're still going to be above grade a little bit. So it certainly will not feel like a lower level. Off to the right-hand side, you can see there's the children's department. The children's department, again, has the book stacks stacked against the back wall here, and the reading and people spaces out near the front. We've got a room for the teens or young adults that happen back in here. Access close to these meeting spaces that they can use as well. We've got a little kitchenette, storage spaces, and public toilets that are associated with the meeting rooms and the public spaces. A little cafe-type space here where people can kind of congregate and chat without bothering folks that are doing more kind of serious study or more serious play in the children's department. And we've also set that space up as kind of a gallery space or a meeting space. Acts like an interroom for this meeting room, so you could spill out during an intermission or kind of gather before or after going into a larger meeting like that. You can also be set up to display artworks and so forth. Directly off the rear, there's a patio that we're envisioning that's accessible from the lower level directly from the lobby. You can also get to it directly from the children's department. You could also take a stair down from the parking lot outside to get to that. Or you could take a path that I'll show you on the site plan. You can also see on this other site plan, you can take a path down that is accessible via wheelchair or meets the handicap code to get down to that lower level. So that folks can use that, and you could also exit that way if that's the way you decided to go. So this is some views of the building, give you an idea about what it will look like. The top left there is what the building will look like from the parking lot. So it really is basically from the parking lot going to look like a one-story building because that whole lower level is tucked below grade there. And as you get around to the sides of it, you can see in the middle of that drawing there, that is what it looks like as it steps down the hill. You can see on the left-hand side there's a set of stairs that run down, and then it gets flat where there's the patio, and then it drops off again at the rear. And you can see much larger windows at that lower drawing, much larger windows around the rear of the building than there are in the front, again, to take advantage of the views and the natural light to allow that to kind of penetrate into the building and use it to help light the building. One of the things that Mark mentioned is we're going for a LEED certification, and one of those things that we're trying to take advantage of is all the natural light that we can. We will have a natural light harvesting system in the building that will automatically dim the lights. In a space like this, when the light comes in these windows, the sensors would actually automatically dim these lights along the closest to the window, and then gradually they'd be less dimmed as you get further into the building, so that we still end up with a nice even light that is made up is mostly with the sun on a sunny day, and then gradually the artificial lighting will take over, and that system is automatic, so that Sam doesn't have to fool around with the dimmers in order to take advantage of that. So that's an example of one of the systems that we'll have built into the building to try to take advantage of the energy savings as much as we can. On the site plan, this is a kind of a schematic site plan. It's looking a little washed out here on this screen, but I think I might have kind of a blow up. This is that paved path that runs down, existing now between the schools and Shattuck Street. There's a little glimpse of it right now. If anybody's been over to the back end of the parking lot right now, there's a dirt or grass road that runs off the rear part of that lot. That kind of runs in this area and connects into that path, and then there's another dirt or grass path that runs around the rear of the building, where our proposed building will be, over to the ball field. And it's basically where they run in the line striping and the mowing equipment that they use to maintain that field. We are going to improve that so that rather than just supporting a pickup truck with a trailer on it, it will support a fire truck so that the fire department can fight a fire and provide safety around the rear sides of this building. So we're looking at a new parking lot right here. These are the tennis courts. I know it's a little hard to see on here, but right behind the tennis courts is we're going to expand the size of the parking area that's in front of that portion of the building. Right now, it's basically a single drive lane with some parking against the trees. It's going to be double-sided with some handicapped accessible parking directly in front of the library to provide some additional parking there. And this is there's a footpath along there, and then there's that handicapped accessible footpath that runs around to the patio in the rear. It might be there. So you can see there in yellow is the proposed new building. There is a wetlands area at the rear We've had that staked out. You can see the little kind of dots where I've kind of done a little connect the dots there. Those are the flags that the wetland specialist has put in. We had those surveyed so that we know exactly where the wetlands are that we're dealing with. So we have that as a setback issue. And then there's that dirt road that we're gonna continue. That is basically gonna pick up at the end of the parking lot and continue back down to where it was. And then lastly, I wanted to show you one of the reasons that we have the parking lot the size that it is we did a little analysis, and this shows an analysis of the library, the senior center, and the town hall facilities. And so the library, it's abbreviated Rubicon Public Library. You probably can't see that. Over on the left, it's in blue, and then the middle column is in red is the town hall, and green shows the council on aging. And then from left to right, it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the two yellow bars over there are the weekends, Saturday and Sunday. And you can see the library hours are labeled there in blue, and they range quite a bit. The council on aging, the senior center, and the town hall offices in blue and red pretty much have standard hours across the top, 5 days a week. And then the senior center is open, from what I can tell from their website, on Saturdays and Sundays as well. The library is open for a few hours on Saturday. The town hall is not open over the weekends. But then you can see those kind of gray bars there in the center of the plant. What that represents is the amount of hours during a typical week that all three facilities are open at the same time. And of all the hours that are open, that all these three facilities are open, there are only 13 hours during the week where all three are open. And so this is a perfect candidate, in our opinion, for a shared parking facility. I mean, the whole idea of having a campus-style plan like this with multiple facilities is to take advantage of cost efficiencies wherever we can. It's also green, to not build more parking that you need, to not build the number of parking spaces that you are going to put into a facility based on your absolute worst case scenario. You want to build it on so we're trying to right size the number of parking spaces. So we've added a number of parking spaces at the library, but we haven't added a ton of parking spaces. But we have also shown that if there were another facility that were to move into the vacated library space, for example, and you have a lot more people here and you need some more parking, we've also shown during the study phase back in 2016 that you could restripe this lot out here and get another 20 or 30 spaces just by rearranging it without having to pave more of it. You could just stripe it more efficiently. And there's a couple of different ways. I think that you could probably do that, and I don't think that would cost a whole lot of dough, but you get a lot more efficient in terms of the way we could park those in there. That's kind of what that analysis was. So these renderings, these are computer modeling that we're doing on the building. They're probably a little bit more up to date than the ones you see over there on those boards. This is kind of what it would be is if you walked out of this door right now and kind of walked over towards where we're planning at, what you'd be looking at. So you can see that there's a large main entrance here. We're trying to show as a main entrance. And then there's a gable that kind of crosses through the building and kind of over those larger spaces, main spaces in the building. And then it extends out and as the grade drops off in the rear. And as you get a little bit further back this way is where the sledding hill is, I guess folks call it, down to the play field beyond, and we're not getting into that. Basically where we are right now is a little bit past where the trees start. That's kind of where we're going to start. If you were to go around from the back, and I guess you'd probably have to climb up a tree a little bit to get this view, because it's standing 20 or 30 feet off the ground there to give you an idea about what that would look like. Looking in at the building, and you can see we've got much larger windows around the back side of the building. And those are really because those are the people spaces, and we're trying to get that natural light to kind of penetrate into the building a little bit deeper there. And so we've got windows that go into the adults collections upstairs where the folks are sitting, the quiet study rooms down at the end. This is a quiet study room. And then in here we've got computers, periodicals, trying to take advantage of that natural light where the people are here. And then down below, this is the children's department along in here, with the story and craft room down at the end, and the exit that comes directly out of the children's department onto the patio, so they can get out here to do outside activities. You could also, it's not shown in this drawing unfortunately, but you you can get off this patio down onto the lawns in the rear. And then along in there, on the right-hand side at the lower level, at the very end would be those conference rooms, and then there's another door there that you can get out from the lobby onto the patio as well. So this is a view, kind of what you'd see if you were to walk in the front door and kind of keep on going and maybe pause right in front of the circulation desk. So we're looking straight back. There's no trees shown in this model in the back, but you'd be looking out at the trees at that point. And so you're looking over some tables and that might have some computers on them. And then there's some periodical low shelving there and a little bit further in the background. And then in the orange is actually some, and we're not suggesting orange, but but there are some soft seats back there near those windows associated with the periodicals collection, so that where you might sit and have a good read. And kind of over where this guy is on the right hanging out there, we probably have some more soft seating in there. Again, a nice spot that you can kind of get up and have a good read, catch up with your friends. And the book stacks are on the left. Lower ceilinged area over the book stack area, higher ceilinged areas over where the people are. This is kind of a view from behind the circulation desk, kind of looking towards the stairs that run downstairs. So the stairs are kind of in here. I know it's hard for folks to see here. This is the circulation desk in the foreground. Actually, the door is going out to the lobby. And we're kind of looking at the other kind of public wing on the upper floor, which is down if you were to come in the door and take a right. So this would be the browsing collections, new books, audiovisual, and down at the end on the left would be quiet study rooms. Book stacks on the right, tucked down there on the right, again on the lower ceiling area. This is another view of that same area where the quiet study rooms are, looking back towards the circulation desk. And you can see there's kind of a wood paneled wall behind the circulation desk, and the windows that go into the workroom so that folks that are working in there can see what's going on, if in case someone stepped away from the desk to help someone and somebody else needs some help, you'll be able to see what's going on. And the book stacks here are on the left-hand side. If you were to go down the stairs, this is kind of, if you were to pause on the way down the stairs and take a look across the hallway there, there's the entrance doors going into the large meeting room. And then off in the background on the left is the entrance into the teens, young adults room. And then kind of right there in the center of the plan here is the entrance into the conference rooms at the end of the lobby space down there. Got some cafe tables tucked off onto the side for more kind of casual conversation, people meeting up. After school projects, we think, we will have a fair amount of kids, we think, coming in. Possibly from the back, we'll have the doors so that you can lock them, so that everybody has to come in the front door if that's what you decide, if that's what Sam decides. But we'll also have them so that you can lock them open and leave them as pass doors during the day if you want to allow people to come in and out. And we're trying to make the building flexible for you. So we can imagine kids hanging out there and, you know, using their devices, getting free Wi-Fi, and maybe having something to eat or snack on before getting into other parts of the library where they won't make a mess. And we're envisioning the floor down here to be something other than carpet. It's easy to clean and take care of if you do spill something there. And this is if you were to kind of come down the bottom of the stairs, turn around, look back at children's. Looking into the children's department, we have a glass wall there. There's the children's desk just inside the door. We're actually looking at the possibility of maybe doing a mural or something, but there's plenty of time for that, about what we might do there on the children's office. And we actually think right in the middle of that mural, we'll probably do some windows in that office so you can see who's coming and going. But if you look straight down there, you can see on the left-hand side would be the windows out to the patio and the door that gets you out to the patio. And straight ahead would be the entrance into the story and craft room. All the kids' kind of activity spaces are up here in the front near the windows, and then the book stacks would be off to the right at the back. I think that's it for me. That's it.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I have two questions, one financial and one for you about, so security, taking into consideration security like for the children's wing,
Yep.
et cetera. So the ability of people to come in and out, right,
Mhm.
means good people and bad people. So are we thinking about that? Is there like
Yes, so
Oh, okay.
typically what we do, there's a door that exits directly out of the children's department that gets out onto the patio, and there's another door that gets directly out of the lobby on the lower level onto the patio. Those doors are exit doors, and I need to have them in order to comply with the handicap code, the egress code. So if there's an emergency, you need to be able to get out of the building, obviously, right? But those doors can be locked from the outside so that people can't get in. They can also be alarmed from the inside. So when you push, there'll be a sign on the door, when you push on the alarm, it's what we typically would do for a door like that in the children's department. There'll be a sign that says, when you push on the exit device, an alarm will sound. And if somebody is gonna open that, lock it into the open position, they can disarm that. So we wanna make it flexible,
Yep.
so that if you have a problem, you know, if there's an alert, if somebody says, I've seen somebody that is making me nervous, you can go around and kind of lock those things down. And then everybody has to come in and out of the front door. And we would imagine that, in our experience, that kind of changes during the seasons and in what's going on, what people are doing, whether or not they're taking advantage of those outdoor spaces every day, whether or not they're having a security problem, whether school's open or not. So I think it may change.
Are there cameras too?
Cameras, we haven't talked about cameras specifically. What we typically will do in a library is provide the work boxes in the conduit so that you can add them. But we wouldn't typically add them unless somebody asked us to. A camera's only as good as, a camera's great for, and especially if you're recording, to kind of go back and look and find out what happened.
Well, like if a
It
kid
doesn't-
took off too, like if a
Right,
kid got out.
but it makes a record of things, but unless you have somebody kind of sitting there looking at
Right.
it, it doesn't really prevent things.
Mhm.
So we'll have that conversation with the building committee, and it will be one of those things that we'll have to decide on.
All right, perfect. And then, so my other question is, I think all of us in this room probably love this idea, or we wouldn't be here, and we want a new library. So I'll speak for myself and say I absolutely want a new library. But I'm trying to understand like how we sell it to people that maybe are not on board yet or are on the fence. So I'm trying to understand the hard numbers. So Mark, when you say we're at 14.5 million right now, and we've done, so 1.5 million of that we've already sort of allocated for design. There's about 40% will be the grant money that we're getting from the, something like that?
Yep.
42% maybe it was. So inside and outside the levy, that seems to be like the really, that's gonna be the problem issue, right? So what does that really mean for people? So if the town says, okay, like, we vote for it, right, we get 2/3, and everybody says, great, it's gonna be inside the levy. So, single mom, running my family, I've got a budget, right? So, then a few months later, all of a sudden, we say, okay, now we need a vote for outside the levy. What does that mean, and would there be determining factors as to why we couldn't do it inside the levy and we would need to go outside the levy? And maybe I'm asking a stupid question, but,
Okay, so I will do my best to answer.
Okay.
This is more of a question like for the Board of Selectmen and FinCom on a certain level, but I will
Okay.
answer as best as I understand.
all right,
So the town has every year the town has a capital budget that they spend money on. At the Maytown meeting, there was $1.9 million that was allocated out of that capital budget. There was also an additional $300,000 put into a capital stabilization fund. Okay, what the library would do would be lower, if the library is funded inside the levy, that capital stabilization fund will be, or not, that total amount money there, that 2.2 million, will be lowered by the debt service for the library. So that basically means, I believe the debt service in 2024 will be about $600,000-ish, depending. So there will be less money for capital projects if it's done inside the levy.
okay.
So, for example, if the fire department came in and said, we need a new ladder truck, right, we're buying one right now, it's $1 million, there might not be $1 million sitting there for a fire truck that year, right? The town's going to have to plan for those. Over time, the way town way town debt works is not like your mortgage. It's not like, when you sign up for your 30-year mortgage, you know exactly what your payment is for 30 years. It's the same.
Right.
Town debt doesn't work that way. It starts high and it fades out over time. So a 20-year bond doesn't mean you're paying the same every year. It goes down every year. So the worst year for the largest hit on your taxes or on the capital fund for the library is going to be in 2024. And then it will go down from there. I don't know at the rate that it goes down, but it will be going down.
And for how many years will we be paying off the library then?
So it will start in 2024 and go for 20 years from there. So the plan that I've heard from the finance people is they're not going, they will bond the library after the grant has been paid. So what they're going to do is for the first 5 years, they're going to do 1 year, basically 1 year bonds. And then when that comes up, they're going to pay it and pay the money from the grant. After the money from the grant has all been received, they're going to put it out to a 20-year bond, what is left. Okay? There's also
And
the
that's
potential.
about half,
Well,
a little less.
so there's still a question of exactly how much money that will cost the town. The town is in the process of getting their free cash certified, which they do on a regular basis. I'm not an accountant, so I don't know. There's been talk that they will have about $2.1 million of free cash that they can put into the capital stabilization fund. And it has been recommended by the finance team that this could be applied to the library. So if they take that 2.1 and the 300,000 that they already have, that's 2.4, and it's lowering the amount they'll be paying every year in the debt service substantially, right? So at last May, the selectmen, some of the selectmen said, let's take that $300,000 in the capital stabilization fund that we put in and increase it every year for the next 4 years until it's about the money that the library would cost, right? And then we don't have to lower the amount we're doing capital every year. We're slowly lowering that 1.9 million, or keeping that 1.9 million in check. That 1.9 goes up every year as other debt comes off the books, as the fire station, police station, high school, all those things are paid off. That number gets bigger, so they're going to limit that increase to try and build up the capital stabilization number, and then that would be applied to the library. Now, on the flip side is other projects coming down the road, like a senior center or additions to the schools or things like that. There may or may not be money inside the levy for that, right? That still needs to be determined how much of that $1.9 million you could take and put to long-term debt service and still satisfy your everyday capital needs. So that's what happens with the inside. If the project goes outside, they will take some portion of the 50%-ish that the town will have to pay in 2024 and move that outside the levy, which means your taxes would be going up by that amount in 2024. How much? Though, if they took the entire amount and put it outside, it's in the 220, 240 range. If they applied that $2.4 million, it's lower than that, right? There's also the potential that there's more money that they could apply, and so it's hard to say what the actual number would be. We can tell you what the worst case would be, but what the actual case will be is probably won't be known for several years, right?
Right, now if they do, so if we go to outside the levy, does that mean that they'll be leaving room for other projects from inside the levy?
That is the thought, that they would be
Okay.
leaving room for other projects, so that if you needed a new fire truck, they wouldn't have to ask for an override, or to leave money for, the police station's in need of repair now, they want to leave money in case that. So those projects could just as easily go to an override as the library does. And I don't understand, it's getting into politics on which one goes inside and which one goes outside on that, which I'd rather not get into, but
Right.
that's, any of the projects can be taken outside. Even the ones, so I learned a lot in this whole process. Any of the things could be taken outside. The high school, which only has like 1 or 2 years left to be paid off, is done inside the levy. They could hold an override vote and take that outside now if they wanted. Anything that's done inside the selectmen are free to have a vote. The selectmen are free to put it on a ballot to take outside. Does that,
Yeah, it does, it just seems like maybe the inside and outside the levy isn't the way to, because that, it seems like everybody should equally share the burden of how much goes outside and how much stays inside, but I don't know.
yes, so one way to look at this is if, it's, on the positive side from my perspective, what this inside and outside does is it puts the onus on the library trustees to sell that we need a new library in October. It puts the onus on the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee to sell whether they need an override in May. And they can come and better say that we need an override because of this project coming down or that project coming down, that we really, as library trustees, don't have insight into. And then they have to sell the town as a whole why an override for the library is good for the benefit of the entire community and not just the library.
All right, so, correct me if I'm wrong, so you're saying that if we go with inside the levy and 2/3 in October, then we're getting the library no matter what?
Yes.
All right, so then it's up to the town to say, oh, well, we wanna do this, we wanna do this, we wanna
So
do this.
if it passes in October,
All right,
we have a new library.
all right,
And then it's up to the finance people to say why it should be outside in May. And even if it fails in May, it will be going forward in October.
all right. Thank you,
You're welcome.
thank you, everyone. Hopefully that answered more than just my question.
There were some other questions people had before about parking. So I believe the library, the plans, there's 16 additional parking spaces being added with the library. That is part of our $14.5 million number. Restriping this whole lot to add the 30 or more spaces is not part of that budget. If the town decides that they want to do the rest, that will become from somewhere else in the future. And that probably should be done after they decide what's happening with this facility, right? There's a space needs group that's happening now. The selectmen have hired an architect. They're looking at what to do with this building long-term. And I have no insight into that at this point, so hopefully they'll have something coming for the spring.
Is there any reason why you wouldn't go with a LEED building as to what level you achieve? Is it long-term payback or initial cost?
All those things factor into how far you want to go along in LEED certification. LEED certification, when I got my AP certification, it's almost 15 years ago. When I look back on what it took to become a LEED certified building then, I would say easy, but because it was a new program. The idea of the LEED program is to try to take some of these things that were kind of on the fringes in terms of technologies and move them more into the mainstream. I think how quickly that has happened has surprised even the United States Green Building Council, who organized the LEED program. We have really pulled a lot of these green strategies into the mainstream, so much so that they have gone out of their way to make LEED certification much harder to get. So they're raising the bar the more time that goes by. And they have raised the bar since we did our study. There's a newer system out now, and it is harder to get LEED certification. So what that really means is that now, in order to get LEED certification, it's a little bit similar to the way it was when we were first starting out. There's a much higher kind of upfront cost in order to do it. You need to pay for these technologies in order to take advantage of them in a lot of ways. But then it also is pushing folks, it's designed to, for the most part, for private development, because that's where the majority of the money gets spent. Municipalities don't have the opportunity to choose wherever they would want to build a building, right? Typically, you're going to be stuck with the pieces of property that you already own. And so there are points, for example, for being close to a train station. We're not going to be able to find a spot in Littleton that's going to be within a quarter of a mile of a train station or a commuter rail or a bus depot. You're not going to get those points. So there's only so far you can go. So getting right up at the top, platinum becomes really hard if you're not selecting your site specifically with the mind to chasing those goals. That being said, gold is hard to get just because you're gonna have to pay a lot more upfront in order to get those things. We're gonna be capturing rainwater on the roof and using that to flush toilets, and that's expensive to do that. And that's nice, but it takes up, you need a lot of room to capture all that. You need the technology to kind of, because you do need to clean it a little bit. You can't just run the rainwater in there with the leaves and everything in it, and whatever little critters get in that water, right? There's a little bit of science and technology you need to do to clean it up enough to get it to the gray water stage so that you can use it effectively. So it becomes expensive, and then you need to manage that, you need to build it, and then you need a place to put it. We're gonna need some tanks inside the building somewhere, so it takes up square footage, and square footage is a premium, right? Every square foot that I add in the building is gonna make the building more expensive, in addition to the technology that it takes. So we have to kind of find that line in there. Now, most folks that are going for LEED certification don't have the benefit of additional grant money to help them pay for it. But the Board of Library Commissioners has been offering that. And the way it's calculated is certification will give you 2.5% of your grant amount. And that's about $5.8 million, so you can do the math, right? The minimum is $100,000, and that takes care of all the little libraries where their grant is tiny compared to yours. So for you to get certified, you're gonna get 2.5%. If you get to silver, you're gonna get 3% of your grant amount. And so we need to kind of juggle that a little bit and find out, how can we take advantage of that money and put it back into the building as best we can to lower your kind of long-term rates in terms of maintaining the building and so forth. So one of the big things is, can you afford to do photovoltaic array on your roof? That's actually one of the biggest things, that will get you the most points for the amount of money that you're gonna spend. Putting extra insulation into the building, things like that, those are cheap, those are easy, and we're doing that anyway. And even if you didn't ask me for a LEED certified building, I'd be putting super insulation on your building, because it just makes so much sense to do it. It's cheap compared to the other technologies. Is that?
So is there gonna be solar, or is it under consideration?
One of those things,
or not?
one of those things we need to nail down.
We are seriously considering solar. There are other grant funds from the state that we're pursuing to see if we can get solar panels on the roof.
Would that- Would that be part of the LEED certification, or could you do that after?
You could do it after the building, actually, the building code has been changed, so that if you're building a building this size now, you need to have the building structure ready to accept solar panels. So if you decided that you want to do it later, you don't have to go back and retrofit the structure of the building in order to be able to do it. That's a building code requirement. So you'll be ready.
As we
even if you
get
don't
farther
want
down
them.
the pathway, we are looking at state grants for solar panels.
It's really what you can afford and then what you're gonna get out of it. Because it will go a long way to getting you certified, but the amount of money you're gonna get from the Board of Library Commissioners, even if you get 3% of your grant amount, it's not gonna pay for a PV system.
So, I'm sitting on the library board and this building commission board. I would say we're going to build a LEED building. I don't know what will make it all the way to LEED silver, because we haven't done the financial analysis of how much it costs versus how much we get. But I think they would be hard pressed to come back and say, we're not doing LEED, right? So-
Once we get this cost estimate that's due pretty soon, we'll have some of it.
And the cost estimate is for a LEED building. It's not LEED silver, but it's LEED building. So-
And then we'll have the information we need. We can do some of that analysis.
Yeah, I'm concerned about the handicap aspects of this building.
Yep.
For instance, the front doors. Are those doors open automatic? Is there 2 doors there?
There is, let's see if I can get back to it for you. The building will be completely handicapped accessible. This is telling me. So I'm gonna get back to my floor plan here. So right at the front there, you can see there's a set of double doors, 3-foot doors that swing open, and then you get inside and there's another set of doors. The vestibule is required for the energy code. We typically, an automatic door opener that you press to open the door is not required in order to comply with the handicap code. It's not a requirement. The handicap code says that you need to have clearances around a swinging door and that you can't have to pull more than 15 pounds of force in order to get the door open on the outside. Once you're inside, same rules, except the force is 5 pounds. It's 15 pounds outside so that the wind doesn't blow the door open. But typically, we have been putting handicap type buttons on doors in our public buildings, because when we don't, even though it's not a code requirement, folks complain and they say, where's the little blue button? Because they think it's a code requirement, but it is not. But we typically would put one on, and we're planning on putting one on here.
I'm on the Disability Commission.
Yep.
So I think when the library came before us, I think that was one of the things that we asked, that they have the button there.
Yeah, they're handy in libraries too. If you come out with a pile of books, you can hit it with your elbow. It's an expense, right? It costs about $5,000 a door. And then it's something that you need to maintain as well. If your money is tight and you don't want to spend the money, it's not a requirement. But we are recommending them. I think it makes sense. We're getting to the point now where we're getting a saturation point. People feel like they're a code requirement. And you're going to get a complaint even if it's not required.
So I'm honestly
downstairs-
surprised that it's not a requirement.
And it's not.
It's,
I think most
I
people.
mean, for someone in a wheelchair, it's very difficult to functionally open a door without the button.
I agree. But it is,
That's
it's not a
shocking.
So
code.
I would think the front
It's not
doors
an
would have
ADA
it, George.
requirement.
I don't know the doors on the lower levels necessarily will have the buttons.
Well,
Typically the front door, we would do it.
well, I'm probably more concerned about the front door.
Mhm.
I don't think too many people go on the backside, trying to get in. But on the emergency exit on the ground floor in the back,
Yes?
we had to ask for, if there's wheelchairs down there, that there be a hard surface
Yes.
that the wheelchair can roll
Yep.
on. Is that,
That is the plan. The
Yeah.
patio will have a hard surface on it, and then that walkway, and if you want to roll out and make your way up, there's a path that we're looking at that will meet the handicap code, that will take you all the way back up to the parking lot if you wanted to, in a wheelchair or in a walker or with crutches, you wanted to make your way up there, we'll meet the handicap code, yes.
okay, so I was concerned about that,
Yep.
whether or not they would have that.
Yeah, there are minimum requirements for handicap. 5% of the tables need to be accessible, 5% of the computers. We typically will make everything in the building accessible. All the rooms, all the doors, all the tables, all the computers. Universal is what we're looking for, not just minimum requirements. All of the toilets will be accessible. Everything is accessible.
One other thing that I wanted to bring up, I think it's sort of kind of misleading a little bit when they say the override to pay for the library. Debt exclusion is the word that they should be using. Yes, it's outside of the budget, but when you said override, you're talking about 2.5.
Right.
And if you override 2.5, there's a permanent.
Right, it's a debt
Let
exclusion.
me finish, let me finish. That is a permanent tax that you will pay from on. Even though it's paid off, you'll continue to pay that. Debt exclusion, it will come off the taxes if you use a debt exclusion.
Yes.
And there's a big difference between the override and the debt exclusion. Yeah, you go outside the 2.5 to get the money to pay for it, but as soon as you pay for it, it drops off. And that's the big difference. And the difference is that paying inside the levy is that taxpayers' taxes won't go up if it stays inside the levy. If it goes outside the levy, then taxpayers, if it get approved, taxpayer taxes will go up for that period of time. They bond it, whatever it is, until it's paid off. That's the difference, and I'd just like to point out, there's a big difference between override and debt exclusion.
Right. So yeah, George is right. People call them different things. So it's typically called a debt exclusion override, which means your taxes will go up for 20 years, basically, until the bond's paid off. It's not by however much is owed in that current, or being paid off in that current year. After 20 years, when the debt is retired, you won't be paying for the library in your taxes anymore. A general 2.5 override, your taxes will go up forever, basically. So this is basically a 20-year mortgage you're paying on your taxes, if it's the debt exclusion. Any other questions?
What's the total parking space that is calculated in for the library?
So directly in front of the building, is that what you mean?
What do you mean by parking?
Where the library at the front there, that you're gonna claim to be library
Well,
parking putting in for it.
the new spaces that we're gonna build is 26,
26?
yes.
The whole parking lot is in the
The numbers are on this,
130, 140
on the
range.
plan in the back here.
They're not reserved for the library, they're just in front of the library.
Well, I know you building it, so I'm saying,
Yeah.
what you're gonna put over there to represent.
You have 129 spaces out there now. And so, we're talking about renovating this end of the parking lot and putting in 26 spaces. This is actually a sketch that we did back in 2016, of how one way you might restripe that lot. And if you did it this way, you could go from 129, with these new spaces we're adding here, you can get up to 163. This shows trees and islands, and if you didn't want to do any of that stuff, it would cost a little less, and the DPW would like it better because it would not get in the way of the snow plowing. You could probably get, 170 spaces in there, just by restriping it, with the additional spaces in front of the library.
Well, I was just gonna say, as far as the parking, I mean, I think it's gonna be better no matter what, because what happens right now is you have those few spots up front, and that's how people wanna come into this building. But this lot could be empty if people don't feel like walking around, so now that we're utilizing this as the main parking, I think it's already gonna be so much better. It's gonna feel so much better, so. I think that's the way to explain it to people.
So the one part that is outside of the scope of our project, but the town will probably need to consider, is what to do with the entrance by the tennis courts. Because there'll be potentially be a lot more traffic coming in there, and it's not really set up for two-way traffic. So that is outside of the scope of anything that we're considering at the moment, but it's something the town will need to address at some point, probably.
Yeah, thank you, that was another question I was gonna ask. Are we gonna kind of keep a one-way in and a one-way out?
That will, I'm hoping the space needs will come back with recommendations on what to do with something like that. I keep raising it as something that's likely to be an issue. I think it's already an issue now. But that will have to be solved, and it's not being solved by us currently.
Okay.
So.
Somebody's gotta solve it.
By the tennis courts will still be usable. There'll be the retaining wall put in basically to expand the parking lot there, over by where the gates are. The gate to the tennis court is. They should be usable all through the season, I assume. They'll have to open up the other gate, basically.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we may put a fence up at the top of the wall.
Yeah.
To keep people from.
And so the path that exists there now, like that the kids might use, like to come up, it's gonna stay a dirt and gravel pathway, right? Is that?
So there's two paths right now. One that goes to the ball fields. That will be improved to be mostly
For the fire truck?
for the fire truck.
Yeah.
The other path is a grass path. We will be cleaning up the knotweed along the path as best as we can, but other than that, the path will stay.
Okay.
There's talk of, you can see the handicap walkway going down. There's talk of looking for grants to do like nature gardens with natural pollinators and things like that along there. So we'll be working with the Conservation Commission to see if there's grant money for how they would like the landscaping done and things like that. So.
Question, if everything's a go on the library, when do they anticipate on starting the library? And the reason I'm asking that is because we don't want the library, because I see there's bricks involved here, and we have bricks involved with the fire station, and of course they put those bricks in at a time when the temperature was lower than what it should have been. That's why we got a problem with the police station now. They came back one time, the contractor, and it says, okay, this is on us. If it happens again, it's on you. So I think when the amount of money that we paid for the police station there, we're probably looking at somewhere between $250,000 to $500,000 maybe to fix this fix this police station. Now, I don't want the library to get into that same category where that they are mixing mud below the temperature and they're putting bricks on it.
Yeah. So I think construction will start in the spring, and it's anticipated to take 12, 16 months.
Somewhere between there. Yeah.
I don't know when they would be putting the bricks on, but we don't want water in the library. We've had enough problems with that in our current facility. We don't want it in the new one.
My guess is they'll be doing it in the fall. You'll have good weather for the masonry.
Well, that's one thing I think need to be made known in this contract,
Yep.
that
So,
this doesn't, if the temperature is lower than what it should be to put that mud in, they don't do it, or we hold them liable for it for whatever period of time.
so the library's being built under, we're not doing the design bid build. We're doing a CM at risk construction model, which Phil can speak to better than I can on this, I'm sure. But basically, we're going to be interviewing general construction management in 2 weeks, and basically picking who's going to be the construction manager for this project. So they're coming on board early, and we'll know more about the project before it shovels in the ground. They will be well versed. It gives us more control over a lot of things like you're suggesting, and on site management, so that we can figure out how best to secure the site without interrupting other activities. So we're trying to mitigate some of those issues. So, did I cover what we're seeing at risk is well
Yeah,
enough?
the only tricky word in there is risk, right? People, when they hear CM at risk, they get a little worried. But I will point out that the risk belongs to the CM. That it's a newer section of the public bid laws to allow a construction management to come on and basically work with the design team, work with the community ahead of time, so that we can work out things like the scheduling ahead of time. So by the time we would get to the traditional bid phase on a project like this, when the documents are done and they're ready to sign on the dotted line, we all have a better understanding about what all the parties are doing. And they don't have to submit as many things to us and then try to convince us that it's the right thing to do. We'll have talked about it during that phase up front. And then when they sign on the dotted line and they give you a number, it's basically they're saying they're gonna do the number, they're gonna build the building for this amount of money, and they will take care of the changes and so forth within a contingency they build into that number. And so you won't see anything over and beyond that, unless something really, really dramatic happens, and that'll be written into the fine print in there. So, you know, if we could start digging and we find a bunch of ledge or something that wasn't identified in the geotechnical, for example. Those are the kind of things that may change that. But basically, they're signing at the dotted line, they're saying we're gonna do the whole job for this amount of money, including the changes in this contingency amount that we're gonna carry. And we're doing that at our risk. That's the agreement that they're gonna have. And so it's a small fee that's associated with that for the work that they do up front. But we think you get a better product for it in the end.
What's the type of roof they're gonna put on?
This is going to be an asphalt shingle roof, actually, is what we're looking at. Asphalt shingle roof with an architectural style design. It's got a 50-year warranty on it, for what that's worth. It's a really low-cost, really robust roof. It lasts about twice as long as a membrane roof that you might have on a school. And it's sloped, so you don't have water sitting on it the way you might have on a school roof or something like that. So we've had a lot of luck with it, and it's just kind of bulletproof. But we will also have continuous insulation directly underneath it, rather than doing the framing and then sticking all the insulation underneath. We'll put the steel deck on, and then we'll put a continuous layer of insulation, a big thick layer of foam insulation on the top. So we'll have very little heat leakage, which can cause problems like ice damming and so forth coming out of the building. A real tight insulation package with that type of roof will give you a good long-lasting roof. It should be easy to maintain.
And that's vented at the top up there, or how is it vented with that roof?
I mean, the roof shingles themselves.
Yeah.
The roof shingles can be ventilated directly in the insulation panel. It's not something that we have nailed down yet, exactly how we're gonna do that. But basically, we can buy an insulation panel that has the plywood layer on the top, that the shingles get nailed into, that has little spacers underneath it, and we can vent the top and bottom. That's an easy thing to do.
What type of heat are you proposing for the building?
We just had that discussion. Our engineers come in, our engineers have done some energy modeling on the building. And so we've given them all of the information on the insulation systems and the wall types and how big the building is, what types of windows we'll have, the R values, the insulation value, all those things. And they did an energy model and they ran that against the base case, which meets the energy code. And then they did 3 other different types of mechanical systems, and then ran them out in terms of their life cycle costs for 30 years. You're gonna get 25, 30 years out of a mechanical system kind of generally. And they told us that the most cost-effective solution for us was a VRF system, a variable frequency, this is a newer system now. Variable flow frequency system. And so basically it is, it's kind of like these air conditioners that you see hanging on a wall, that has a little kind of a suitcase-sized unit outside. It's split system, they're called, right? So it's very similar to that, and it has refrigerant piping that runs out to the condenser outside. Except that you can run this unit in reverse and pull the heat out of it from the outside, and basically you're using the outdoors kind of like heat sink in the summertime, and you're using it almost like a geothermal system in the wintertime. In other words, you're pulling the latent heat that's in the air that's out there already, and you're pulling that in and reusing that, mixing it with the air inside the building. You make up the difference for it with electric resistance. But it's a very efficient system. These systems, people have been using them for years and years. The only real drawback was with them 10 years or so ago, they were only good until you got down to be above 15 degrees. And then if it got colder than that, the heat portion of it couldn't keep up. But now they've redesigned them and they're good to below 0. And so they really work well. So you see lots of them kind of in the more temperate belt, which is probably moving further north with things the way they're going. But, you know, kind of down in that temperate belt in the middle of the country and lower, people were using them, have been using them regularly, and they're making their way further north now. But they use them in Canada and everything regularly now, because now you can get down to below 0 with them. And they're really efficient. And what's nice about them is that you could have 3 of them in this room and 2 of them in that room. This room may have got a lot of sun kind of pounding in on it early in the morning, and it gets the heat up, and you may actually want to shut the heat down in this room, or it's getting overheated. And that unit, these 2 units will start pulling the heat out of this room. And if Sam's office on the other side of the wall is in shadow and it's still cold, you pull this heat out of that room and it will go directly to Sam's unit and pump that heat back down without turning the furnace on. So it's really, really efficient way you can move the temperatures around inside the building without spending any money except for the cost that it takes to move the refrigerant around. And the refrigerant lines are as big as my finger instead of a big. We used to be running around like a VAV system. You'd run around hot and cold water piping, which is about an inch and a half, depending on how far you're going, and then a big piece of insulation around it. They take up a lot of room, and then a lot of duct work. So the duct work that's associated with this is just fresh air, so we're bringing in nice fresh air, smaller ducts, because we're not mixing the other air with it, bringing in nice fresh air. So it means less duct work, it means less piping, it means easier controls, because they're all kind of built in and they talk to each other. It's just a really neat system.
The system also uses a lot more electricity than gas, which works well with our electric rates, and if we put on the photovoltaic, it's even better. So.
Yeah, we have a little library we did out in Western Mass. Little. It's 8,000 square feet. But they put it's Western Mass, they have a big piece of farmland, what looks like farmland, and they put a ground-mounted photovoltaic system out there. It pays for all of their electricity, and they didn't even put a furnace in that building. So there's no fossil fuels, and it all runs off of the solar. So it's amazing what you do with a system like this. You don't have enough roof space to do that. We'd have to clear out half the woods back there and give you a system big enough, but I mean, as the things get more efficient, it will be easier and easier to do.
Any more questions? Well, thank you all for coming, and we'll look forward to seeing you all at town meeting on the 28th. Thank you.